Houston. Houston, we have a problem. DJ Apollo has landed. I repeat, DJ Apollo has landed.
Hear me?
Well, greetings and happy holidays. You are listening to the Tales of Music and Film podcast. My name is Christian Taylor, and I want to personally thank you for clicking on today's episode. Hope you guys are doing very well. I was in the mood today to record another episode. It's been a very long and stressful week for me. Things at work had not been going the greatest, and everything that you can imagine could go wrong went wrong this week, and we've all been there, and I'm just trying to overcome it. Just this whole week was just a complete disaster for me. Nothing went right, but that's going to happen throughout your life. So I'm trying to get into a better state of mind, and I figured, you know what? What better thing to do than to record another episode tonight? It's almost 10 p.m. where I'm at right now. It's December 12th, 2025, and I felt like, you know what? I want to do another recording, just to cheer myself up, because I like doing these episodes. It's kind of like a form of therapy for me. So we have a really cool, creative episode for today, but I realized when I did the last episode, I forgot to tell you guys that another event that I went to while I was gone on my hiatus from podcasting, me and my father got to go check out a Beatles tribute band at the Bloomington Fine Arts Center called the Fab Four. Now, this is a band that I've been wanting to see for a very long time, because in my personal opinion, that band is the closest thing you're ever going to get to seeing the real thing of the Beatles. All four of them looked and sounded just like the real thing. They were so good. And what's really cool about them is that they do their shows in stages. Stage 1, they come out wearing the suits. And Stage 2, they're in the Sgt. Pepper uniforms. Then Stage 3, they're in the outfits that all the members wore near the end of the Beatles' career in the late 60s. And they have a Ed Sullivan impersonator that comes out a couple of times and does some stand-up before moving on to the next set of songs. And that whole show was just pure magic. It was amazing. We had a really good time, and I would feel very honored that I was given the chance to see them live. Great show. I'm actually in the process right now of ordering tickets for something else. I have another very cool concert coming up next month in January on the 30th. I'm going to be seeing a AC/DC tribute band called Noise Pollution, and apparently these guys are held up to be like one of the best tribute acts of AC/DC, so I'm still trying to figure out who I want to take with me to go see that, but that's going to be one heck of a show too. I'll never say no to some AC/DC. So as you can see, I'm a big concert guy. Someday I might have to do an episode covering all the concerts I've been to, because from 2016 to now, I have been to a crap ton of them. I love concerts. They're one of my favorite things to attend. I'll be going to those things as long as I can walk, I'll be going to concerts the rest of my life. So that was just a few things I wanted to share with you guys. I like sharing with you, stuff I have coming up. It's very cool. Hope you guys listening in. Hope you guys got some cool events or concerts you're getting ready to attend. You only live once, so it's like, hey, why not go out and go see some stuff? It's pretty cool, It's a lot of cool adventures to go on. But what is going to be today's topic? Well, we're not going to be covering anything specifically. I had this really cool idea that I've been bouncing back and forth in my head. It's just one of those weird things, I'll be working at Walmart, and these ideas come into my head, and this idea kept popping into my mind a lot about what I would have done with this trilogy of films, how I would have written the story and stuff I would have changed. I am talking about the Sequel Starwars Trilogy, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. So, for anyone who doesn't know, the podcast, all the episodes are completely free. You don't have to pay to listen to any of them. All my episodes are free. And back during my days at Eastern University, me and my old friends, Preston and Aiden, we did 2 episodes covering the sequel Star Wars trilogy. If you guys want to go listen to those episodes, we had a lot of fun with those, and I think you'll get some good laughs out of those recordings. But I had this really cool idea, right? I made a list for each movie on stuff that I would have added or how I would have written the story. And I have a lot of cool stuff here on things I would have put in these films I think would have made the movies better. Now, the trilogy, it was disappointing on some fronts, but I prefer to think positively. And even though the trilogy went nowhere near right with the story the story didn't go in the direction I hoped it would go. But at the very least, I'm the last generation that got to see a brand new Star Wars trilogy with the original cast. So nobody can take that away from me. So nonetheless, that was cool. And this month marks 10 years since The Force Awakens premiered. And I'll never forget being a little kid. I was in high school, freshman. I was a sophomore. I was halfway through my sophomore year when Force Awakens came out. I still remember me and my friend Ethan Combs. It was his birthday present. His family gifted him midnight tickets to the very first premiere at our town theater, and me, him, and some other friends, we all waited in line for like an hour in the freezing cold to go see Force Awakens, and it was a highlight from my childhood that I will never forget. And I still have my ticket in one of my scrapbooks somewhere. That was a childhood memory that I will hold in my heart the rest of my life. My favorite out of the new trilogy was probably Force Awakens. I had a lot of fun watching that. I mean, the film does get a lot of hate. A lot of people say it's just a reskin of Star Wars New Hope. I disagree, but I gotta respect people's opinions. I can see the similarities with the films. But I have a list for each film on stuff that I would have added into these films, or stuff maybe I would have changed a little bit. So let's get into it. I think it's going to be a very exciting episode. I'm not sure how long this one will go for, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so, and one more thing. Before we get into this, I just want you guys to know you can follow me on my Snapchat page if you choose. I also have a Facebook fan page, so you guys can go on and follow if you want to see my postings when I do new episodes. It's called the Tales of Music and Film fan page on Facebook. And with my Instagram, you can follow me at... let's see, ct.theman, no spaces. You can go give me a like on my page so you guys can see all my posts. And let's see here. I do have an account on X. Let's see here. So on X, you can give me a follow at Christian Taylor. So at Chris37733732. That way you guys can tag me if you want to. And go ahead, you can feel free to give me a follow on my X account. I'll be posting on there whenever I do, future episodes. So I just wanted to take a moment to promote my pages. So without further ado, it's 10 p.m. at night, so let's get into it. Okay, so Force Awakens. Now, there actually isn't a whole lot that I would change with Star Wars The Force Awakens. You know, overall, I think out of the sequel trilogy, I think this movie was the strongest out of the three of them. Because I think this film did do a very good job of reintroducing, this generation into the Star Wars universe. It gave us a story that we were very familiar with a lot of similarities. I think it did a good job of introducing the new characters while bringing the old characters back. It was a very strong opening to the new trilogy, and I don't think I would have changed that much. But one of the things I would do is that, in my opinion, I think most of us will agree that there should have been a flashback scene in this movie with the original cast all together, explaining, why Luke left. Like, we didn't have to see the reason why to, but I feel like, because we learned in Last Jedi that he thought about killing his nephew, so we don't need to learn that, but I feel like there should have been a scene, after that, where the gang's, talking to him and stuff, and he just tells them he's leaving. I feel like a flashback scene would have been very cool, because we never got one scene with all the original characters together throughout this new trilogy, and that made a lot of fans angry, and I completely understand why. it would have been nice if we could have gotten one scene, with Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, the Lando actor. It would have been nice to have them all together at least once, but we never got it, unfortunately. So yeah, I think a flashback scene with the main cast would have helped the movie a lot. And my second thing is that I think Lando should have appeared in this movie because we don't see him until The Rise of Skywalker, and he doesn't really do much for the story, unfortunately. I feel like it would have been cool, at least in Force Awakens, they could have, introduced him just to show, hey, he's around. I feel like he should have appeared in all 3 films because he's a very cool character. I was very surprised they didn't really give him anything to do, unfortunately. But yeah, I think in Force Awakens, Lando definitely should have appeared. Now, another thing I would do with this movie is that one of the new characters that Force Awakens introduces is Finn, and he is a ex stormtrooper from the First Order, where he leaves because he doesn't agree with what they're doing. In the opening scene for Force Awakens, we see them attacking this village in the desert, and the stormtroopers are ordered to kill all the civilians in the village, and Finn couldn't do it. But I feel like, his redemption arc in this trilogy, if you want to call it that, I feel like it was very weak, because, he didn't really do anything that he needed to be redeemed for. I feel like what they should have done was they should have had him, shoot some of the civilians, maybe. I feel like that would have, and then he, immediately regrets it, and he's, haunted and stuff, and that's what pushes him to leave. I feel like that would have been more of him beginning his redemption arc. Because, like I said, he doesn't really do anything evil that warrants a redemption arc. And the only thing that I can think of is that maybe if he had joined in with the other stormtroopers and mowed down the civilians with their blasters, I feel like that would have warranted the start of the redemption arc, That's something I think they should have put in there just to make it more, strong, I guess. And now here's a big change that I would have done with Force Awakens. We all know the scene of how Rey is drawn to Luke's lightsaber in that chest when they're at that bar when Han and Chewie take Finn and Rey to that bar to find a friend that could get that BB-8 droid back to Leia, because BB-8 has a piece of the map that Leia needs in order to find Luke. But anyway, Rey is drawn to Luke's blue lightsaber, and I feel like what should have happened instead, I think Finn should have been the one to be drawn to it. I think Finn should have been the one to walk down to that room and find that lightsaber, and then, it's hinting that he has the Force and that he has the Force connection. I think that would have been better, and I think that Obi-Wan's ghost voice talking to him would have been better. I think Finn should have been the one to be drawn to that lightsaber. I think that would have been better. And my 5th point, so during the ending lightsaber duel where Rey is fighting Kylo Ren, you see that we get a scene right before that where Finn has his fight with Kylo, and Finn actually defends himself pretty well against Kylo. And I feel like that would have been more of a hint that Finn has the Force. But Kylo, of course, beats him. And I think then Rey uses the Force to get the lightsaber. Then that hints that she has the Force as well. And then, of course, we get our famous fight of Rey versus Kylo. But this last decade, ever since Force Awakens came out, I never liked that Rey beat Kylo. That was really ridiculous. Kylo was trained for who knows how long, ever since he was a kid with the dark side of the Force. The guy is a pro at this point, he should have wiped the floor with Rey. She's never used a lightsaber once in her life, and she just beats a Master Sith, really? That didn't make any sense to me at all. I think what should have happened was, I feel like for the first half of the fight, they could have been showing Rey how powerful, how, oh yeah, Rey's got him. But then Kylo just goes full beast mode on her, and then just completely destroys her. Like, he was taking it easy on her, but he's like, you know what, I've had enough. Then he just, goes full Sith mode on her, and then he beats her. And I think what should have I think Rey should have lost a limb. I think to show just how barbaric and evil Kylo was in this movie, I think Kylo should have taken one of Rey's arms off during the lightsaber duel, just to show like Kylo is not messing around. Like we watched him kill Han. So I feel like this lightsaber duel, like he cuts Rey's arm off, and she like falls to the ground, and she's like panicking, and she's like, "Please don't kill me." And also another thing, I daydream this a lot. I like to imagine like Kylo walking up to her, getting ready to give the final blow with his lightsaber to kill her. But then at the last second, he has a change of mind. He like senses the dark side in her, and he's like, you know what? I sense potential. And then he leaves her there, and he just walks away. And like the Knights of Ren walk out of the woods, then he just walks away and lets Rey live. Then Chewie shows up and helps Rey and Finn back to the Millennium Falcon, and they get out of there. I think that would have been way more impactful. Does that not sound cool? I think that sounds really cool. That's what should have happened, in my personal opinion. Kylo should have really beat Rey like heavily, just showing like, Rey, you are nowhere near ready, And I like the idea of hinting of dark side energy within Rey, how she thinks she's the good guy, but it turns out we are getting some hints that she's not. And for my last point for Force Awakens, one last thing that I think that I would change is that now I think I'm in like the most of the fan base. I agree with most of the fan base when I say that, like, did it not annoy anyone else that Chewie did not get a hug when they landed back at the Resistance base? I mean, like Chewie literally just watched his best friend get killed right in front of him. And then who does Leia hug when they get off the ship? She hugs Rey, a girl that she's known for like 10 minutes or something. Instead of, Chewie. So I think what should have happened during that scene is that Rey thinks that Leia's gonna hug her, but then Leia runs over and hugs Chewie instead. Then like Rey is getting like this sense of like neglect, like she thought that she'd finally found what she was looking for, like a meaning in her life, and she's not getting that. Like, I like the idea of, like, there's this, like, slow neglect. Like, she thought she was going to automatically get all this love and attention from these characters, and she's not getting that because she's a complete stranger to them at this point, I think that's a good way of starting to build up this whole, I thought I found what I'm looking for, but not really. We're kind of getting those little hints. And we'll get more into that as we progress through the films. And then other than that, those are the only things that I would change in The Force Awakens. Everything else in the film I thought was really good. And I know I probably get burned at the stake for saying that, because it's a very common thing that Star Wars fans do now. They just go to town on this new trilogy and just rip it to shreds. Which I can understand from a certain point. I mean, the films, they were weak, they're watchable, and they're okay, but they got nowhere near as good as the original trilogy. And there's a lot of things I wish they'd done differently, but that's everybody's different opinions. I mean, I think this new trilogy is going to get more famous as time goes on. I mean, I've seen, there's Star Wars fan pages that I follow on Facebook, and I see pictures all the time of, like, families going to the Star Wars area at Disneyland, and I see dozens and dozens of girls, dressed up as Rey, so Rey's character is resonating with this generation of kids, so it's not, so that's a good thing. I'm glad the kids are watching these new films and loving them. Like, that's good, So I think the trilogy could have been done better, but it's still reaching a new audience, so you gotta keep that in mind. There's kids out there who love these movies. So now we're going to be moving on to The Last Jedi. And to begin, so I have a lot more talking points with what I would have done on this one. I have a lot. About 17 points. I'll try to go through them as quickly as possible, but we're good. We're good on time. I'm going to try to see if I can get this to about an hour, but we'll see what happens. So we're about 20 minutes in. So my first thing that I would do differently, so Last Jedi, I think that I would keep the opening scene of the First Order in like attacking the Resistance as they're leaving that planet they're on. I would keep that in there, but I think I would, cut to Kylo, training, because that's something the Last Jedi didn't address. Because like literally at the end of Force Awakens, when the Death Star 2.0 is falling apart, General Hux runs in and Snoke tells him that bring Kylo Ren to me. It's time to finish his training. Yet we see him not train one bit in Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. It's like Rian Johnson just completely forgot that scene happens. I feel like there should have been a cutaway to Kylo training, and then he's like getting even more powerful than he already was before. That way it makes him even more dangerous. Then meanwhile, we cut back to Rey on the island. And then another thing that I would do is that I would make Luke maybe a little more cold towards Rey. Or it's like, yet again, Rey thinks that she found the guy who will help her find meaning in her life. And yet again, he neglects her too. And then just throws the lightsaber away and walks off, It's like again and again, Rey keeps trying to find a parent figure, and Han's killed, Leia doesn't give her attention, and they're just Luke. So it's like the anger in her is boiling, like it's building up, to the point where she's starting to wonder if she's on the right side, kind of thing. And I like the idea. So another thing I would do. So Finn, when he wakes up, I think that he should have gotten another Force message from Obi-Wan, and that's what makes him wake up in his BAFTA tank when he's healing from that lightsaber duel in Force Awakens. I think that would have been cool, where he's starting to think like, what's going on here? There is something going on I need to look into. And I would, now, do not get mad at me for saying this, but I would keep the casino arc in the movie. I think the casino arc was a good idea, but I feel like it needed to be done a little better. But I like the idea where it's like they were trying to show it's like the Resistance isn't entirely good, and like the First Order isn't entirely bad. It's just kind of giving you another perspective from a civilian standpoint on the war. I would keep that in there, but one thing I would add during that arc is that I think it would have been cool if Finn and Rose happened to like walk into one of those like fancy rooms, and then like Finn finds an ancient lightsaber in one of these rich people's collections, and he takes it. Maybe it's a lightsaber from the old Republic days or something, Like, do you remember that ancient lightsaber that Rey gets in Rise of Skywalker that she keeps? I think that lightsaber should have been on display in one of these rich people's rooms. I think Finn finding it and then taking it would have been cool. Because you gotta remember, Rey has the blue lightsaber with her on Luke's island right now, so obviously Finn's gonna need his own lightsabers. I think him finding that ancient lightsaber and keeping it adds a lot to the story, and I'll get more into that here in a little bit. And we all remember, there's a scene in Last Jedi where Luke finally is persuaded by R2-D2 to train Rey at least a little bit in the ways of the Force, and we get that scene where Rey is sort of drawn to the dark side a little bit, not really. I think they should have went all in on this scene. I think that she heavily should have been drawn, to the dark side. And I think, and then Luke being shocked, like, even more. I think that would help build up this, thing of like, Rey is being drawn more and more to the dark side all the time. It's like, wait a minute, I thought she was supposed to be the main hero of this story. What's going on here? And I think that would have been another cool thing to add in. And something else that I would change is that, so we all know where Rey fights Luke and confronts him to tell her the truth about what happened between him and Kylo. And one thing that I would change is that I think that there should have been a lightsaber duel between them. I think Luke should have had his green lightsaber with him and Rey's, and there could have been like a small little fight between them. But then Rey is able to Rey's able to beat Luke because she like harnesses dark side energy. Maybe she uses lightning on him on accident or something. I think that would have been cool to show like, wait a minute, there's more to her than what meets the eye here, potentially. And then we get the whole flashback scene of him explaining what happened. I think Rey beating Luke with dark side power, I think that would have been another cool little build up to make the audience start questioning on whether or not if Rey's the good guy still. Because we're starting to get these hints that something is not right here, like what's going on? Okay, let's take a look here. And another thing in Last Jedi that always bugged me, we never got a scene of Maz explaining how she got Luke's lightsaber, because we get a scene in Force Awakens where Han's like, where did you get that? And she's like, that's a story for another time. Yet we never get a scene in Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker of her explaining how she got the lightsaber. I feel like there should have been maybe like a flashback scene of her finding it. Because the last time we saw that saber, Luke got his hand cut off in The Empire Strikes Back, and it fell down that chasm into the unknown. Like we never saw it again. So it's like how is that thing still around? It would have been cool to maybe learn how, but oh well. And we all know how Rey gets this plan where she's going to, have Chewie drop her off at the First Order ship because she believes that she can save Kylo and bring him back to the good side. She's like, that'll end this whole conflict. She thinks that she has everything she needs to turn him back to the good side, right? So she goes to the ship, and then she's captured, and then Kylo's taking her to meet, Snoke, right? And the plan goes south, like, really fast. Like, Snoke reads her, and he's like, I sense the dark side in you. And then Rey's, like, all shocked, and she realizes this plan is not going to work, and I like the idea of, like, she breaks free, maybe attacks a couple of the guards and makes a run for it. She makes it to the hangar. She's getting ready to get into a ship, but then, like, Kylo grabs her with a force and moves her back towards him and forces her to accept, you know where you came from this whole time, didn't you? Say it. Who were your parents? Then Rey's like, they were nobody. And then Kylo's like, that's right. They were a couple of pirates who sold you for drinking money. You don't belong in this story. You come from nothing. But you are something to me. I feel like that would have been like a very like epic scene where it's like the only thing that Rey had left keeping her good was a lie, And you know what? And here comes the big thing, right? Rey should have turned to the dark side. That has been my big belief ever since the new trilogy came out. Rey should have turned evil. I really think that would have added a lot to the story. I love the idea where Kylo reaches his hand out to her and she takes it because now she has nothing left. Nobody has given her any attention, And the only thing she had left, keeping her good, was a lie this entire time. Like, she's a nobody in this story. you know? She's just some random person who happens to have the Force, you know? There's nothing special about her at all. And then Kylo's, persuade her to join him. That would have been such an epic twist that, like, Ryan Johnson definitely should have done that. And they team up and they take an army down to that red salt planet, to wipe out what's left of the resistance. And as for the final battle in Last Jedi, I wouldn't change that much. I would keep it about the same. I thought it was pretty cool. But I would add an additional scene. So that whole scene of like Luke and Yoda talking with that tree burning, I would erase that. And instead, what I would do is I think the scene should have went like this. Luke's in his hut, contemplating on what to do, and then Ghost Yoda shows up to talk to him again and convinces him to leave the island and go save the galaxy again. And Luke walks over to the cliff to raise his X-Wing out of the water as he did in The Empire Strikes Back. And Luke's like, Yoda, I have been cut off from the Force for 30 years. I don't think I can do this. Then Yoda says the classic, as I've said before, do or do not. There is no try, Then Luke reconnects himself to the Force and he's able to raise the X-Wing out of the water again. It would have been a little cool little callback to The Empire Strikes Back. And that he's able to get his ship, he fixes the ship, gets in it, and flies to locate the First Order and the Resistance. That's what should have happened. And then, let's see here. Now, what should have happened, there should have been a scene like, Kylo's like, I'll deal with the main, attack. I want you to go find those Resistance scumbags and go take care of them. And then Rey's like, tells him, yes, I will do that, And like, I like to imagine where it's like she walks into the base and then like Poe and like Finn, all of them are so excited to see her. And then she's like standing there giving them like this look of like, guys, I'm sorry, but I'm not here to help you. And then like a whole like gang of stormtroopers show up behind her, and then she pulls out her lightsaber, and then she starts attacking the rebels, and then her and Finn get into like this lightsaber battle, and then it cuts to Kylo on the main front, and then we get Luke landing. He's like running into the base. He finds Leia. They talk for a while. And then he goes out on the front line, to confront Kylo, and then they have that duel. I really like the idea of like it's cutting back and forth between Finn and Rey's battle versus Kylo and Luke, because they're both friends to enemies kind of thing. I think that would have been a cool little thing they could have did with the movie, where they do like this twist where you thought that Rey was going to be the main hero, but no, Finn is. He's the main, good guy of this story. He's the Force user. I think that would have been a cool twist in the story. It's like a gotcha kind of thing, where you thought Rey was going to be the main hero, but nope, she's not. But then, Finn is beaten by Rey. Rey's like walking over to kill him, but then Rey gets force pushed into a wall and knocked out, and then we see who did it. It was Leia. Because in Last Jedi, I thought that scene of Leia being sucked out into space and using the Force to pour herself back into the ship was kind of like a weird way to show her using her Force energy. I think what should have happened. I like the idea of like Rey walking over to Finn to kill him, but then Leia walks over and force pushes her, into like a wall or something, and then knocks her out or something. That would have been way more cool. And then like Finn gets up, and then Leia's like, Finn, she's gone. We have to go. So then like Luke beats Kylo, right? But then Luke lets Kylo live, and he tells him, Ben, I'm sorry. There is good in you. I know it. Then he turns the lightsaber off and runs away. And then Luke, Leia, Finn, Poe, and all of them, the remaining Resistance fighters, all get on the Falcon and get out of there. And then it cuts to Luke, telling Finn that I sense the Force in you. And then Luke's like, tells Chewie and Poe to set a course for Coruscant. Then Finn and Leia are like, why are we going there? Then Luke's like, we're going back to the Jedi Temple. It's time to begin your training, kid. Then it cuts. And then, the last scene that we see in this movie is Rey and Kylo in front of Snoke. And Snoke is just, giving them a big scolding. How could you let them escape? And then, Rey's, had enough, right? And Rey kills Snoke and tells Kylo, we don't need him. We're in charge. And then the two of them take command of the First Order, and then it cuts to black, and then the credits start rolling. Cliffhanger ending. Now, does not sound amazing? I get chills just thinking about it. Can you imagine how epic that would have been if they'd gone that route? I think about it all the time, man, that would have been so darn cool had they done that, And I definitely would have had Lando be in this film as well. I would have liked the idea of Lando and Chewie are the ones driving. Because I think it would have been cool for Lando to become Chewie's new best buddy since Han's dead, So I think that would have been cool. But yeah, that's what I would do had I been in charge of Last Jedi. Those are the things I would have done differently. But so we have now covered Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. So now we're going to be getting into The Rise of Skywalker. Okay, sorry about that. I had to pause the episode for a quick second to get a water drink in there. My voice was starting to get tired. But now we're moving on to The Rise of Skywalker, the most controversial film out of the new trilogy. And I can definitely understand the hate with Rise of Skywalker because this whole thing just felt like a complete retraction of everything that was built up in Last Jedi. I mean, it's like Disney didn't even have the guts to commit to this story. They caved to all the toxic fans that were giving Last Jedi so much hate for no reason, and they caved. And they just made that film complete pointless, and they were just undoing everything that film built. And I hate it when sequels do that. It's ridiculous. If you're going to tell a story, commit to it, okay? And don't cave in to these toxic fans. Tell the story you want to make. If they don't like it, then boo-hoo. Some people will like it, some people won't. That's just how the world works. But don't cave in to toxic fans. That's what I think. But the first thing that I would do... So, I have a lot of talking points for The Rise of Skywalker. This one, it definitely has the most things that I would definitely change. And the first thing I would do, I would have had it be 2 parts. I remember my best friend Jonathan told me that originally J.J. Abrams wanted The Rise of Skywalker to be 2 parts, but Disney didn't let him do it. And that was a big mistake. I feel like The Rise of Skywalker definitely should have been 2 parts, because there was a lot, to wrap up. And I feel like one movie just wasn't enough. It definitely should have been 2 parts. That's the first thing I would have done. So the first thing we're going to be doing here is that I'm going to be covering... So imagine, had Rise of Skywalker been in 2 parts. So Rise of Skywalker Part 1, what would I have done? I would have had the gang go to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Because, ever since I was a kid, I always had this, daydream of, Luke, Leia, maybe some other characters, walking through the ruins of the Jedi Temple to look for something for the plot, And I always had this, vision of, Luke and Leia finding a hologram of Padme that's still around or whatever, and them watching it, because for the first time they finally get to see what their mom looked like, I think that would have been a cool scene to do. And then, Finn learns while they're there that he was a Jedi, because I like the idea they walk into the room where the Jedi had their meetings in, and he's like drawn to the chair that Mace Windu sat in, giving us some hints. I wonder who he's a descendant of, you know? And I also like the idea of like before this, when they're on the Falcon flying to Coruscant, there definitely should have been a scene of like Luke telling Leia what happened and why Kylo went to the dark side, and then Luke doing everything he can to tell her that I am sorry for what I did. I'm going to make this right, and that would add some conflict to the story. That definitely should have been in there. And then it cuts. So they're at the Jedi Temple, and after Finn is starting to learn that he might be a descendant of Mace Windu, we cut to Kylo and Rey back with the First Order. And Kylo's like sleeping in his bunk, and I like the idea. Like, I had this idea, right? He's having like a flashback scene of when he was a kid with his dad, and they're like talking about stuff. And then I like the idea of like Han telling him like what a good kid he is and how there's a lot of good in him and stuff. And this flashback, I feel like, is supposed to start building. Kylo is starting to maybe have doubts about what he's doing, because after everything that went down in the last movie, Luke let him live. And that is starting to make him wonder, is Luke as bad as I think he is, kind of thing? He's starting to have doubts about what he's doing. And now this is a scene I get chills just thinking about. I love the idea. So like Rey's like by herself in her room, and she's building her dark side lightsaber. And it's a dual-wield one, like the one Darth Maul used in The Phantom Menace. And I like the idea of like Kylo like walking into the room and telling her like, well done. Now it just needs a crystal. And then what do? They go to the Jedi, they go to the lightsaber crystal planet that we see in Star Wars The Clone Wars. It's the planet that Jedi go to get their kyber crystals for their lightsabers that gives them the unique color that they have. And I like the idea of like Kylo and Rey going there, and then Rey picks out her crystal, because with part 1 of Rise of Skywalker, it's kind of like a team timeout for Finn and Rey. Like they're both training for that final duel between them in part 2. So both of them, Luke is training Finn, Kylo is training Rey, kind of thing. I think that would have been cool for as like the main points of this story. So Rey gets her crystal, right? But then she learns that there's more to it. She has to go out and complete a task in order to become a full Sith. And she decides that she's going to go after Luke and kill him, because he at this current moment he is the last Jedi out there. So like, what better person to go after than him? And Luke trains Finn, and then Finn finally learns his backstory. Mace Windu is his grandfather. Now, I think that would have been a cool thing to do. I always had this thought sometimes of like, I wonder how cool it would have been had he been a descendant of Mace Windu. I think that would have been a cool thing to do, to have, a different descendant not related to the Skywalkers, like who's to say, that Mace Windu followed the rules, perfectly. He could have had kids, you never know. Maybe he kept it a secret too. I mean, maybe Anakin wasn't the only one who had a family of his own, You never know. I think that would have been really cool. And then, like, I like to imagine, like, near the end of the film, like, Finn finds his hometown and where he came from, and he meets his mother, and the gang goes with him to his village, maybe, and or town. I like to imagine, Lando, Poe, Chewie, and Rose are all there with him, and he learns that his dad was killed the day the First Order took him from his family, because you learned that most of the stormtroopers are brainwashed kids, so the First Order kidnapped, and they brainwashed them into being soldiers. And I like the idea of like Finn learning his backstory and who he is, and then he fully embraces who he is. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm a descendant of a Jedi. So that's why I'm Force sensitive. And I like the idea. I love the idea of like him and Luke having like practice duels together. That definitely would have been very cool. And then there's an ending battle in Finn's town where all the residents arm up with all their weapons to fight the First Order because Rey's there to fight Luke and earn her kyber crystal. And then Luke tells Finn, like, you are not ready for this. Get the others and get them out of here. I'll distract her. And then we get this lightsaber duel between Luke and Rey. And Luke's trying to resonate with Rey, like, Rey, I'm sorry. I should have helped you, And then, like, just another mistake that Luke made. And then Rey's like, I am beyond helping. And then, like, they have another duel together. It gets really epic, right? But Rey's gotten more powerful. And then during this duel, Luke realizes there's only one thing that he can do. He lets Rey kill him, just like Obi-Wan did with Vader in New Hope. And then Rey kills him, and then he falls to the ground, and his body vanishes, just like Obi-Wan's had in New Hope. Luke gave his life to save the others. Now that would have been a very epic ending, to his story. Him giving his life to save, his sister and his friends. His last good act. I think that would have been an epic way to end the first part. And another thing that I would do, right? I like to imagine Kylo being there when Luke's dying, and I like the idea, like, Rey walks away, and then, like, to leave him for dead, then Kylo walks over and picks up Luke. Like, Luke's laying in Kylo's arms, and Luke looks at him, and then Kylo, and then Luke tells Kylo, like, Ben, I am sorry for everything. Your father didn't want this for you. There is still good in you, I know it. Or something like that. Then that's when Luke dies and vanishes. And then Kylo cries for a minute, and then and then this was the turning point, right? Where the others are getting on the ship, but then Leia tells them to wait. She senses Kylo. She's sensing that Kylo's having second thoughts. And then Rey's like walking away, right? But she senses something. She turns her lightsaber on, and then her and Kylo start fighting. Kylo tried to kill her, right? Like, Kylo's like, Rey, what are we doing? This is wrong, And then they start fighting, but then Rey calls the army over, maybe, and then Kylo retreats, and then he runs on the Falcon with the others, and then they get out of there, and then Rey is now the leader of the First Order, and she is fully now a full-time Sith. And I like to imagine that the gang is flying away, and then Kylo and Leia hug on the ship, and Kylo's like telling Finn, like, we have to do something, like, what are we gonna do? And then I like the idea, like, the gang have no idea what to do now. I mean, like, the resistance is like almost all gone at this point. It's just a small amount of them left, and they don't know what to do. They're in the Falcon, not knowing where to go next. Lando and Chewie are driving, and they don't know what to do. But then it cuts to Rey, coming back, to the First Order, and she is told that they have found this very strange signal on this planet, and then Rey takes the Knights of Ren with her, and then they go to this planet, right, and they search the temple, and she finds the clone of Palpatine there. I like to imagine the final shot, like, we hear this, like, scary, icky voice coming out of the darkness, and then the Emperor walks out, like, hello, Rey, nice to finally meet you. and then it just cuts to black and the credits start rolling, like a to be continued shows up on the screen. Now that right there would have been a cool setup for part 2 of Rise of Skywalker. So now we get into part 2, and so part 2, the first thing that I would do is that I would have Leia become the new trainer for Finn and Kylo. So we have like maybe a small little time jump in between part 1 and part 2. And I like to imagine, like Finn and Kylo are starting to become friends, and stuff. I think Kylo's like trying really hard to redeem himself for all the horrible things that he's done. And he's, reconnecting, with his mom, and all that. And this looks very heartwarming to me. I think that would have been cool to see. And Leia's now training both of them, and then, Lando, Poe, Rose, Kylo, and Chewie and Finn go on the adventure to look for that ancient artifact blade thing. I really did enjoy that arc that they put in the movie. It was kind of given like Indiana Jones vibes in Star Wars, which I was not complaining about at all. I thought that was cool. And then I definitely would have kept that in there. And then meanwhile, the Emperor is like training Rey one more time. Like Rey's getting one last training session, and before that epic duel between her and Finn, and she gets all this new power that she didn't have before, and she even learns that she can use Force Lightning. And I like the final shot where she like looks at the camera and her eyes are like dark yellow, like kind of like a callback to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, when his eyes went yellow. And then the gang going to Poe's home planet, and they learn his backstory and how he used to deliver spice. That was very cool. I definitely would have kept that in there, and I like the idea of like his like gang of friends like join in the resistance to help fight, and it kind of plays a role in the ending battle on how all these different groups of people showed up to fight. And I'll get more into that here in a little bit. Now, here is something that I would add. Now, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I remember when the first trailer for Rise of Skywalker came out, there was a scene in there where 3PO is like, "I'm taking one last look, sir." And they're like, "At who?" "My friends." Now, that really got me in the feels, because I really thought that 3PO was going to die in this, but no. He loses his memory for like maybe 5 minutes, but then R2-D2 magically puts this thing in the back of his head that gives him his memory back. So it's like that whole emotional scene was completely pointless. And then like that scene of 3PO being like, "I'm taking one last look at my friends," that should have been kept in there. And the reason, he's doing this is because 3PO learns that this whole time the First Order had been tracking the rebellion because 3PO had a tracking device put into him, maybe at some point in the earlier films, maybe even all the way back in Force Awakens, and they didn't know about it. And there's no way of getting it out without him getting destroyed, maybe. And I like the idea where it's like, 3PO sacrifices himself to save the others. I like the idea where like stormtroopers enter the room, 3PO turns around with like bombs strapped to him, and he's like, "I'm C-3PO, nice to make your acquaintance," and he pushes the detonator and blows himself up. I think that would have been a very emotional scene, because 3PO and R2, they're the only characters to appear in all 9 Star Wars movies. I think that would have been a very emotional moment for 3PO to be destroyed. And R2 like literally losing his best friend. I think that would have been a very emotional thing. But with 3PO gone, that gives, an opening for BB-8 to have a bigger role in the story. Maybe BB-8 and R2 become friends. That could have been a cool thing they could have done. And let's see here. Okay, so that's the end of that page. Okay, so we are nearing the end, folks. This might go a little over an hour, but that's okay. Okay, so then we get the scene of the Emperor gifting Rey her own army So this is the first order. So the first order is now, bigger and stronger than it's ever been before. And as for the final battle, I wouldn't change very much, to tell you the truth. I actually really did enjoy the final battle in Rise of Skywalker. I like the idea of like Lando showing up with like this giant army of like civilians who stood up to fight to help the resistance. That was really cool. I definitely would keep that about the same. So Poe leading the attack, I would definitely keep that in there with maybe like Leia alongside him. Definitely would, that'd be cool. And then Kylo and Finn, team up to end this once and for all. And then they decide that Kylo is going to go after, the Emperor, and then Finn is going to go after Rey to try to reason with her. And then we get, that final epic duel that we've been waiting so long for. And it goes on for a long while. I like to imagine, I can imagine that lightsaber duel with Obi-Wan and Anakin in Revenge of the Sith on Mustafar. Imagine that, but this time it's with Rey and Finn fighting. And we're like seeing these perfectly insane, over the top, choreographed lightsaber duel. Like, it's so cool. Like, friends who are now enemies, And I like the idea of like the whole role reversal where you thought Rey was going to be the main hero of the story, but no, Finn is. And her and Finn fight, for a good while, and then Kylo, it cuts to Kylo fighting, the Emperor. It's very epic, and the Emperor's like telling him, "What a disappointment you are, You had so much potential, That, to me, is so cool. Like, the Emperor's like trying to lure him back, to the dark side, but Kylo won't fall for it. And the duel goes on for a long time, right? And then Rey stabs Finn with the lightsaber. But then Finn, falls to his knees. And you know what he does? He puts his lightsaber down and hugs Rey. He hugs her and tells her, "I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me most," And he just hugs her. Then he eventually falls into her lap, right? And she starts crying. For the first time, she was shown affection, like she was finally shown affection, and then she's like in total shock at this point, right? And then it cuts to Kylo and the Emperor fighting, right? And the Emperor beats Kylo. The Emperor is walking over, right, getting ready to Force Lightning him, and like Kylo's like accepting his fate. He thinks that Palpatine's gonna kill him, but then a hand is placed on his shoulder, and you hear Hayden's voice telling him, "Kylo, get up. You're not done yet." And then Kylo like turns around and he sees Ghost Anakin behind him, and then we see Ghost Luke there too. Maybe even ghosts of other Jedi. And they all show up to beat the Emperor once and for all, and then Anakin beats the Emperor and kills him again, keeping the prophecy the way it was in the main trilogy. And then Anakin, walks over to his grandson and tells him, "I am so proud of you for what you have done." And then him and Luke, give him that, that smile of honor and respect, and they vanish. But then Kylo is sensing that something's wrong, and he runs into the room and finds, Finn dying in Rey's lap, and Rey knows there's only one thing left that she can do. She transfers her life force over to Finn to save him, and then she dies. And then the last thing, she's looking at Finn and Kylo, and she's like, "Thank you for believing in me," and then she vanishes and disappears. Then the whole fortress starts falling apart, and then like Kylo and Finn gotta get out of there, and the remaining First Order ships are all falling apart, being destroyed. The First Order, it's over. The rebellion has won, and Kylo and Finn get out of there right as the fortress is falling apart, and it's over. The First Order is now gone. And everybody's like celebrating, but with Kylo and Finn, and the others, Leia and all of them, they're very silent. They're sad, still that they weren't able to save Rey. It's a bittersweet ending. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. They really thought they were going to save Rey and bring her back, but she died a hero. I think that would have been a great ending to Rey's character, where she turns good again. Her last brave act was saving her friend. That would have been cool. And what I came up with, so really, folks, the main problem that I was having was trying to think, how would I end this movie? And this is what I came up with. So, and last thing, please keep in mind that with these talking points, like what I'm telling you is like variations of things that I would do. I know I'm not going into detail specifically on what I would have the characters say and do, but I like to imagine these events happening in the films. So for Rise of Skywalker Part 2, here's what I would do. After the ending battle is all said and done, I would have a like a 2, maybe 3 year time jump. And Kylo or Ben has now, he's now a Jedi again, and he has started a new Jedi Order following the footsteps of Luke and Anakin. And Finn's helping him. And I like to imagine, he's training the kids. I like to imagine he turns around, he sees Anakin and Luke, as ghosts smiling, and they're so proud of him. I like to imagine that, and then it cuts to this final scene where the main characters, Poe, Finn, Chewie, and Ben, walking down the aisle where the entire First Order army, the entire Resistance army is there, and they're walking up to this stage to receive medals for all the good work that they've done. And on the stage is Leia, just like in New Hope, but maybe with like Lando, BB-8, and R2 on the stage. And they walk up, and then the first person to get a medal is Chewie, because he didn't get one in New Hope, which I think made a lot of fans angry. After all this time, Chewie finally gets that medal. Poe, Finn, and Ben all get one. And Leia's looking at them with how proud she is, and then the main characters turn around, the Rebel Army all start clapping for them, then it cuts to ending credits. And that's the end of the story. A nice little callback ending to Star Wars New Hope. Now that, I think, would have been a way better story than the one that was given to us. I think about this stuff a lot. It just randomly pops into my head while I'm zoning aisles at Walmart. I'm like, wow, that would have been cool, I think. But please keep in mind, this is what I think would have been cool ideas for this story. For you guys watching, if you have any cool ideas, like maybe write them down yourself. Maybe make a Facebook post. Maybe do your own recordings talking about like what you would have done with the story. I'm just sharing with you what I think would have been cool that they could have included with these movies. But that marks the end of my talking points on things that I would have done with the sequel Star Wars trilogy. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I wanted to do this because I wanted to do this kind of like celebration, because like I said, 10 years ago, me and my buddies went to the our hometown theater to see Force Awakens, and it was such a breathtaking experience. You just had to be there to understand. I was raised on Star Wars. I watched the main trilogy religiously, and I was very late to the party with the prequel movies. I didn't like them at all when I was a kid. It wasn't until I was in my late teens where I really started to appreciate them. I rewatched the prequels to get ready for the Obi-Wan show that came out back in 22. And I rewatched them, and I actually really liked them. They were way better than what I remembered them being. So, yeah, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and getting to see this new trilogy with the original cast members was a real treat that I will hold dear to my heart for the rest of my life. I feel very lucky that the universe gave me that amazing opportunity to experience that. So, that is going to mark the end of this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this very interesting idea I had. Hope you liked it. My next episode is going to be a very special one because I'm going to have a guest on here. and she is one very special guest. You guys are not going to want to miss this one. It will be coming out very soon, and you're going to love the topic. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I look forward to sharing it with you, so please stay tuned. So, until next time, my name is Christian Taylor, and you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film.